All right, good morning, everybody. It's James Morris, and it's Tuesday morning's edition of Ask the Master Auto Technician. I have people bring me cars all the time with different problems, and one of the biggest problems I hear people complaining about is brake noise. We talked about it before hundreds of times, probably over the years. But brake noise is normally a sign, not that the brakes are wore out. I have cars come in with brand new looking pads. I mean, everything looks new, but boy, do they make noise. You back up, squeak, you go forward, squeak, and people don't like that. Now, I tell them what that squeak is nothing more than a vibration, just like taking your fingernails across a chalkboard. That's exactly what you're hearing. Doesn't mean the brakes aren't able to stop. Doesn't mean that they're dangerous. It just means that they're irritating as all get out because you're going to hear this high-pitched screaming noise, and that's avoidable. It is avoidable. And what it is improper installation. I'm going to point fingers exactly where it belongs to. It belongs to the person doing the work. Whoever did the work, and I hear them all the time, well, they're going to make noise like that till they break in. Well, if you tell a customer that, if a shop tells a customer that, first off, they didn't do the job right. Second off, they don't know what they're talking about because the noise is going to stay there forever. It's never going to go away. If you leave with brake noise, it's going to stay with brake noise. About the only noise I know that'll go away is if you're initially doing a break-in or bedding of the pads and you gently bring them up to speed and you gently bring them down. Sometimes you might hear a shh noise because you got rotors that are, well, they've been cut or they're brand new and they got a non-directional finish, and you might hear kind of a scraping noise for the first 2 or 3 times you hit till you bed or till you get the pads where they're working like they're supposed to. You're burnishing the pads is the correct term. You're making them fit to the rotors. Too many people take brand new pads, put them on old rotors and try to do the same thing, and it just don't work. You're lucky to get, if you put new pads on an old rotor that's already been, you're only going to be stopping on average about 30 to 50% of the pad. That's it. 30 to 50% of the pad's making contact with an old rotor when you put it on, that's how it works. That's why you put new rotors or you cut the rotors. Well, I'm not going to say cut rotors because cutting rotors is just about gone away. In order to cut rotors on today's cars, you need to A, cut them on the vehicle. That means they need to be turned on the car, not off-car lathe, but an on-car brake lathe. Well, I've got one, a lot of shops have them, but we found out we can go to XYZ parts store and buy those parts just as cheap, if not cheaper, than we can actually charge the customer to cut the rotors. If you're charging an hour labor to cut a rotor on a car, and an hour is $100 an hour, where the rotor costs only $50, what do you think you should do? Charge the customer more money and give them less product, or give the customer more product and less money? That's what we recommend doing on that. And just because you got brand new rotors doesn't mean the job is over there. We're talking about noise. Some rotors you see they look like they've been painted with gray paint. And I've had people say, well, what do I do about that? And I go, well, leave it alone. It's designed not to contaminate the pads. It's actually designed, there's a name for it. I was sitting here reading it the other day. They were talking about the name. Anyway, it's a special name for it. Well, here it is. Installing brake rotors that got a dull finish. No, this is known as a geomet coating. That's what it's called. Geomet coating, or G-E-O-M-E-T. Geomet, however you want to say it. Geomet coating, and what that does, it actually allows it to keep from rusting when it's sitting on the shelf. Customers have a problem with corrosion. They think that they see a pad that's corroded, got rust spots on it, it's bad, it's defective, it's going to break, it's going to crack. No, it won't happen. That's not what causes brake pads to crack, brake rotors to crack. No, that's another story. What they're doing is they don't like corrosion. They think that if it's rusty, it's bad. That's why for years we've had you pull a rotor out and you might see a little rust on it, but most of the time you see a little clear grease on it. And you need to wash that off. Now, I know some people out there, I never wash that stuff off. Well, if you don't wash that stuff off, you can get the pads where they'll make noise. Yes, they'll make noise because you'll get you'll contaminate the surface area of the pad where it makes contact with the rotor. And what you end up doing is putting all that cosmoline, that clear cosmoline, in that was on the rotor to keep it from rusting. Now it's embedded into the pad. Now you've got contaminated pads, and now the customer is upset with you because not only does there a initial smell, that goes away. That's pretty familiar. But what happens is you get this constant Oh, kind of. You also can get kind of like a growling noise. Not that they make a squeaking noise, but they'll kind of growl like they're something because the pads have been contaminated. Those little balls of cosmoline have actually rolled up on top of the pad, and they're actually sitting there on top of the pad. So when you hit it, it makes the pad vibrate. So you get a brrr, and kind of a strange noise. And that's because the people didn't put the rotors on there correctly. They didn't wash them. And when you put noise, we're talking about noise, you've got to be able to insulate wherever the pads make contact with other metal parts. When you put the pads inside for the, for the caliper to push together, when you're mounting them, wherever the pad make contact on the caliper mounts, they need to be slightly lubricated with brake lubricant. Not just any lubricant, mind you, not the lubricant that you grease ball joints with or tie rod ends with. A special brake lubricant that's designed for brakes. It's high temperature that keeps it from melting. Remember, brake lube has a high melting point of over 700 degrees Fahrenheit, whereas engine or lube for your ball joints has a melting point of about 300 degrees. It won't take much before you got that all over your pads and making a mess. Really. That's one of the reasons we tell people do the job right or just don't do it. Too many people think that putting a brake job is just throwing pads on there. That's a brake job. No, that's a brake reline. That's not a brake job. Brakes today go on average 60 to 80,000 miles on average, front and rear. And they're designed to wear out equally. The front brakes are going to wear out about the same time as the back brakes. Now, the back brake pads are actually, if they're disc brakes, are about, I'd say, about half the thickness of the front brakes. The front brakes do 70% of the stopping. The back brakes do about 30% of the stopping. When you're stopping, you put that foot on the pedal, you got 70% power going to the front brakes, 30% to the back. That's how it works. It's been that way for years and years and years. The difference is how it's applied and released due to anti-lock brake systems and traction control and things like that to make it more of a fine tuning. But pretty much it's always been the same. Ever since I was a kid and learned to work on cars, that 70% stopping on the front, 30% on the back. That's how it works. That's why we have proportioning valves. It's not 50-50. A lot of people say, well, it's 50-50. No, it ain't 50-50. It's 70-30. It's been that way since I can remember. And that's one of the questions they ask you on the ASE certification. How much stopping power is assigned to the front and how much is assigned to the back? If you understand that, then you understand the importance of how the front brakes get so hot compared to the back brakes and why they wear out so much faster than the back brakes if not done correctly. But if brakes are done correctly, brakes are from the factory, are done correctly, they come from the manufacturer done correctly, there's nothing wrong with them. The brake fluid boiling point's high, there's no contamination in there, everything's lubricated like it's supposed to, and normally the first brake job on average, I would say 70,000 miles. That might be a good rule of thumb there. I've seen some higher. I've seen some cars, I've seen Priuses go 200,000 miles on a set of brakes. That's another story because they don't use their pads and shoes to stop the vehicle until below 7 miles an hour or an emergency stop. That's how that works. That's why you can get so many miles on a set of brakes on a Prius or a hybrid vehicle out there. But noise, back to brake noise. If you're doing a brake job and you're going to do it this weekend, and you say, well, my brakes have been making noise, I got a growling noise, I'm already down to metal, I can hear the screamers on there, and I've already scored the rotors up. Well, then what you're going to do is you're going to do these things. You're going to replace the rotors. You're going to replace the pads. If you've got hydraulic, if you've got disc brakes on there, you're going to replace the hardware. That's right. All that metal hardware that holds the pads in there, throw it away. Put new one in there because good quality pads, and that's what you're going to buy, is the best quality pads you can find out there, not the cheapest ones. You want the very, very best. It's money well spent. You have good, better, best on brakes. Don't buy the good. Don't buy the better. Buy the best. If you do, that few extra dollars you spend is money well spent. Buy the best, change the hardware, lubricate the contact points on it, and change the brake fluid. Before I forget, if you've got rotors that don't have a Geomay coating on it, or Geomet coating on it that are silver, and you put your fingernail on it, and you can kind of write your name and the grease in it, go wash that with hot soapy water, as hot as you possibly can. If you can put it in your dishwasher, that would be great. When you pull it out, it should look like a rusty, it should be all rusty. That's perfect. If you can do that, I know you're not going to have any problems with the brakes making noise. That's one of the keys right there. If you can get that brake rotor clean, it's got Cosmoline on it, where it won't contaminate the pads, and you put new pads on there, new hardware, lubricate the contact points, and do everything like you're supposed to, and change the brake fluid, I won't ever see you for a brake noise problem. Oh, maybe I will, but I kind of doubt it. You know, sometimes after 3 or 4 years, you may get a noise. We have to take the pads off and lubricate them, stick them back on again. That sometimes happens too. But 90% of the time, I don't have this problem on a car if it's done correctly from the factory or done correctly by another shop. That's how you do a brake job correctly. Don't forget to change the brake fluid. I know people say, well, I didn't go into the into the calipers or the wheel cylinders. Well, if you just put pads on there, you need to open the bleeder. It's something I'm going to tell you that a lot of people don't tell you about. A lot of people just tell you put a screwdriver there and push it back. If you do, you're going to push back all that nasty fluid that's in that caliper back up into the master cylinder. On its way to the master cylinder, you're going to bypass the certain valves that are in the anti-lock brake system. And if you go backwards on them, you can kiss that $3,000 system goodbye, and you're going to have to pay someone to fix it, because more than likely you won't have the technology or training or equipment or the scanners to do the job right and to marry it to the car, because it's got to be married to the car. You just can't change it, go to the salvage yard, buy it, and stick it in your car and expect it to work. It won't work. So that's why it's not like it used to be. Your daddy's car of today ain't like your granddaddy's car of yesterday. It's completely different when it comes to brakes. The thing that's remained the same is those rules and regulations and to keep from making noise that we learned in the 60s and 70s still apply. Clean your rotors. Make sure you use new hardware. Don't you reuse old hardware, use new hardware. Make sure if your calipers are not binding and sticking, and replace the caliper bushings. If you got a General Motors product out there, or some Dodge products out there, they have caliper bushings that are rubber. They get hard. They get wore out. Change them. It's money well spent. It really is. Because the biggest complaint I get from customers about brakes is not that they don't stop. It's that they make noise. That's the biggest complaint. They make noise. I mean, they'll stop on a dime and kick back 9 cents change, but the customer doesn't like it because it makes noise. We see cars all the time that have had brake jobs done in the last year. And the cars stop fine, but the customers say, I hate my brakes, they make noise, they've done that. What can I do to fix it? And I said, well, to do it right, you got to do it right. All that money you spent, well, you got a great deal, but it didn't work out right. They put old pads on new pads on old rotors, or they didn't change the hardware, or they didn't do this, or they didn't do that. They didn't change the brake fluid. Believe it or not, those few things I've talked about make the difference between a A+ brake job or just a C brake job. That's right. Most people out there get C brake jobs because they don't want to spend that extra 10 to 15% to get it right.
Now, another complaint that people have is excessive brake dust.
Well, yeah, that has a lot to do with not picking the right pads and the right rotor combination. People buy the cheapest rotors, the cheapest pads, and they wonder why they have this. Always buy good, better, best. When it comes to what they've got on them, they got good pads on there, or better pads. If they put the best pads on there, good, better, best, they wouldn't have brake dust because it would be ceramic. That's right. They wouldn't have that brake dust, or very, very little. People don't put the right pads that the car calls for. That's why they have problems. They cut corners. You know, penny wise and pound foolish. You know, my mama complained about that a lot when I was a kid. Don't be so penny wise and pound foolish. Didn't quite understand what I was saying until I got older, but don't be cutting corners when just a few extra dimes will make a job last so much longer and so much better and with least amount of problems. That's the best advice I can give you about brakes this morning. If you got a car question, give us a call at 850-763-0555. We're here Monday through Friday from 6 to 6:30 answering your automotive questions right here on Fox 28, and we'll be right back.
If you want the best deal in town for tires, you need to call Baytown Tires at 873-8900.
Hanson and the guys at Baytown Tires take pride in serving Panama City for over 20 years. Baytown Tires on Highway 98 in St. Andrews. All service work backed by a nationwide warranty.
Water is too powerful to fight alone. Mr. Router Plumbing. Sink, shower and toilet emergency drain services.
Recommend changing the brake fluid when it gets down to a boiling point around 325, 350 degrees. I say 350. I do. You know, that's something I've seen seems to be holding quite true over the years. About every 2 to 3 years, your boiling point of your brake fluid will drop from 600 degrees Fahrenheit when it's brand new down to around 350 degrees after 2 or 3 years. That's just normal because brake fluid's hygroscopic. Dot 3 is what a lot of cars can handle. If you're not sure if your car handles dot 3, if that's what it calls for, you can always put in dot 4. Dot 4 is the go-to brake fluid if you don't know what kind of brake fluid your car is supposed to have. I'm serious. If you got a General Motors out there, you can put dot 3 in it, or you can put dot 4 in it. Yes, you can. You really can. But here's one brake fluid you can't put in your car if you have analog brakes out there. That's silicon brake fluid, or that's dot 5 brake fluid. Never, ever, ever, never, ever, 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 never put in dot 5 into an anti-lock brake system. It can cause you to get yourself killed. Because what happens is when anti-lock brakes are doing their job, when you're in a panic situation and it's oscillating very, very rapidly, off on, pumping that brake action for you, it can create bubbles because silicon brake fluid is not hygroscopic. It's not. It does not absorb moisture. That's why a lot of people in classic cars like old 57 Chevys and things like that, I've seen those things after a year, the brake fluid's gone from 500-600 degrees down to 200 degrees because of the cast iron reservoir. Master cylinders they're just porous. They just absorb. You can actually see them sweating water when the humidity's just right. You really can. They're terrible. They really are. That's why we went to plastic reservoir. Got rid of the cast iron, went to aluminum plastic reservoir because the cast iron was just filling our systems up with moisture. So we got rid of cast iron and because of weight too, and went to aluminum with a plastic translucent reservoir. That is that's what just about every car out there has. I don't think I've seen a solid where you can't see through brake reservoir in 30 years. They're all where you can see if you got fluid just by tapping it. They don't want you actually taking the top off unless you're actually going to do a reading on it to see what the moisture content is or what the copper content is. Copper content, and people say, copper, how does copper get my brake fluid? Brake fluid when it's brand new is clear. It looks just like water, maybe a little yellowish tint to it, darn close to water looking. But after 2 or 3 years, you take a look at it and it looks kind of like motor oil. It's dark. Matter of fact, if you take it and take a teaspoon of it out, or take a little dropper or a medicine dropper and pull it out, you'll see it's got a green tint to it. That green tint is copper, and that's from the moisture inside the brake fluid pulling the copper out of the nickel copper alloy brake lines. That's right, they're nickel copper brake lines, and that moisture eats like acid on the inside of that brake line, pulling that copper and putting it into solution. That's what turns the brake fluid dark. It's the copper content. If your copper content's too high, and it's too high if it's dark, that's one. And two, you can't tell the moisture content just by looking at it. You have to have a refractometer to actually measure the amount of moisture. And you got to have a refractometer to measure moisture and honey. You got to have a refractometer to measure the content of what you have in your antifreeze, and it's the same thing. You got to have a refractometer to measure what's inside your brake fluid, what the moisture content is. New brake fluid has a boiling point dot 4 of over 600 degrees. After 2 to 3 years, I've seen it drop down to 300, 350 degrees quite easily. It's just a part of aging. It is. It's just that's the way it is. That's why brake fluid is why it's to be checked. It's to be checked and to be changed as needed. I see in brake fluid check, brake fluid check. They don't ever say change. Now, if you have a Chrysler, or you have a Mercedes or a Jaguar or a Land Rover, they tell you to change the brake fluid. They don't tell you check. They say change. American companies, with the exception of Chrysler, which they just usually say check. Now, how do you check brake fluid? Well, there's two things you check: copper content and moisture. I have some people say, well, there's brake fluid in it, that's checked. No, that's not checked. That's what I see shops do that all the time. They checked my brake fluid. They said they gave a plus on it. Why'd they do that? Well, it's between the full and the minimum level. Well, that doesn't mean the brake fluid's any good. You can have a boiling point not much better than water and get yourself in a world of hurt and stop and go traffic because your brake fluid will boil. And when brake fluid boiling point gets below 350 degrees, it will boil too, and your pedal gets spongy. It doesn't stop like it used to. You have to put more effort to it. You're going, dude, gum, what's going wrong with this? You know, or you might even be getting noises or that more of that brake dust because your brake shoes are constantly rubbing because you've got air in there. That's another thing. If you got the wrong pads and the wrong rotors, and you didn't change the brake fluid, and you got air bubbles in there, and those air bubbles get hot as you're driving, the bubbles get hot and make, the brake fluid gets hot and makes bubbles, which expands and pushes against the brake pads ever so slightly to rub against your rotors. And then you wonder why you got black wheels after 6 weeks. Well, that's why. You didn't do the job right. And any shop that does a brake job like that, you're not getting your money's worth. You really aren't. You may pay. To do a brake job right, you're going to have to change the rotors, you're going to have to change the hardware, you're going to have to change the brake fluid, and then sometimes you have to change the calipers and the calipers and lines. If you got more than 100,000 miles, that's an entire possibility you may have to change that. That's a very common problem I see, especially when cars get over 100,000 miles and they're going on their third brake job, they're about 100 to 120,000 miles. That's something I've seen. I've got Randall on there. I have no idea what Randall's question is. Randall, what's your question this morning, sir?
All right, my question is on a 2000 F450 7.3, will a speed sensor shut the engine down, or will a super bad dirty filter shut the engine down?
I know a super bad duper filter will shut an engine down, air or fuel. That I know for a fact.
Okay.
That's something I can't tell you
well,
about the
I got
speed
in
sensor.
yesterday. Let me tell you how it happened.
All right.
Riding along, engine light come on, engine started dying.
Okay.
All right. It did not shut off.
Okay.
It died down to the point of an idle, then it shut off.
Okay.
I turned the key off, turned it back on, all the lights went out, it cranked up, I took off.
Mm-hmm.
And it done it again later on.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got here, and I am very, 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 I'm upset with myself, shameful that the air filter was that dirty.
Sir.
And I got it, cleaned it up.
Yeah.
I got one of the K&N air filters, washed it, cleaned it up real good, put it back in, which I haven't drove it. But I put my code reader on it. The only code that I had in it was a left front speed sensor.
Well, a left front speed sensor on a car that has traction control can actually keep them from accelerating. I have seen that happen, but I don't think that will happen on the 450. I don't think you have traction control. You just have anti-lock brakes on it, and I doubt that will happen. But diesels have all the air they want. And they have, and that's where a lot of people mess up. And I'm going to tell you, the K&N filter. I know you got a 7.3, but I made a lot of money years ago by people running K&N filters because they wouldn't clean them or change them correctly.
Well, let me tell you the reason that I have a K&N filter in it.
All right.
This is a service truck. I work on heavy equipment, and I'm in the woods. Every day.
Oh yeah.
With the dust, the mud, all that, and I used to, here again, I'm really upset with myself, because once a week I always clean that air filter.
If you'll do that.
And changing it so many times, it get quite expensive.
Oh, it does. It does. But yes, I agree. You're going to have a diesel. Golly gee whiz bang. They run about 22,000 gallons of air for every gallon of fuel they run versus a gasoline engine of about 15,000. So you get a lot more air running through there. And if you don't have a good clean air filter, like you said, it'll idle, but it won't hardly do anything other than that. And you said it's a 7.3, and a 7.3 is a workhorse engine. And if
I've got two of them, and in our work we probably got 5 of them, and in the company.
Yeah.
But anyway, I was just seeing if it would shut it down.
No,
so
500 Pico will not shut one down. It really won't. If you just got a vehicle speed sensor, but a dirty air filter, you'd be surprised how many 7.3s are coming here on a hook. First thing I do is pop the air filter, look at it, and go, I can't believe this. Turn around, turn the key, fire it up, and it runs. And they look at me and go, how'd you know that? And I said, you ain't the first person running around with a dirty 7.3 air filter, and you won't be the last. It's very, very common because that filter is kind of small, isn't it? It's relatively speaking.
Yeah.
You would think they'd have a lot bigger air filter like they had in the 6.0s or the 6.4s.
Absolutely.
But no, they got a dinky little air filter in here, and now they.
Well, let me tell you this.
All right.
I have a 97 7.3. the air filter's about twice the size of this 2000.
That's because someone put the heavy duty air filter box in there. I was going to say they do make a replacement box that's twice the size of the one you got. And if this is if you have a service truck, I would invest in the money and buy that aftermarket part. I may
do that. I didn't know that. I may do that. Like I said, I don't know a lot about the cars and trucks, stuff like that. But heavy equipment's what
I don't know much about heavy equipment, but I do know about these cars and trucks. But yeah, put that filter in there. I'm going to tell you something. Change your fuel filter every 10,000 miles. I know you people don't
10,000.
Every 10,000 miles. Change your air filter. Get this. Change your air filter every 15 to 20,000 miles. Or on your model, take that thing out once a month and clean the damn thing.
Well, that's what I've been doing. I've been doing it once a week.
Oh, well, that's fine.
Depending on how dusty it is in the woods.
Yeah. Well, here lately it ain't been very dusty because we've had a lot of rain. It's been muddy more than anything.
That's true.
But I will say, yeah, if you're not alone on that, but get that heavy-duty filter you can put on there that's got the bigger box, and you will be very pleasantly surprised. But I've seen these things in one oil change completely clog up. And that's why I tell people, I said, take these daggum diesel filters and clean them, replace them just about every other oil change. I tell them to. Now, these big diesel 6.0, you can't even see inside them. You have to weigh those filters to see if they're
right.
You can't see it. You got to weigh them. People say, what? You got to weigh them. I just tell customers on those, every 20,000 miles, we're putting a new $150 air filter in. They go, what? $150 for an air filter? I said, it's on sale today. And
yeah, it's on sale.
Yeah, and they're expensive.
You get what you pay for.
They're expensive. They are expensive as heck. These 6.0s, 6.7s, 6.4s. But the 7.3, if you got that, don't get rid of them. Don't let someone talk y'all out of selling those 7.3s because they're
absolutely not.
They will
It'll
last.
be here right on. I will tell you, it's right at 300,000 on this engine.
Well, I've got them out there with 500,000 miles and still going strong. The biggest thing they do.
Still going strong.
Biggest thing out there, they take out, people don't change the air filters. They use K&N filters. They take out the turbocharger and the long lead injector on number 8. That's the biggest thing I see on those.
Well, one more question.
Sure.
Now, of course, we
30
have
seconds.
Changed. You have worked on our Mini Cooper. You've worked on another car, this and that. But one other thing, what would you recommend on oil? I run 1540, the Shell, 1540, and I've run it in this truck ever since it was brand new.
Yeah. Well, you're doing a good job. If you're doing that and you're not having any problem, keep up the good work. I mean, if you're running Rotella 15W40 Shell, that's fine. I like running 5W40 synthetic is what I like running.
In a diesel?
Yeah. 5W40.
Okay.
Yeah, honest to goodness, that is an acceptable oil to run in it. It's not 15, but 5W40. It's a 5 weight when it's cold, and it turns into a 40 weight when it gets hot. But if you've been having real good luck running 15W40 and you're at 300,000 miles, I'm not going to tell you to change horses in the middle of the stream. Keep doing it. Just keep doing what you're doing. I mean, you're doing fine. But for someone out there that doesn't do good maintenance on like that, I tell them to run 5W40 full synthetic oil, either AMSOIL or Mobil 1, and be done with it. Diesel, make sure it's diesel oil. Make sure it's 5W40 for diesels. Diesel oil. Do not put 5W40 for cars in there. That's a different oil, not the same oil.
Part of what I'd like to let you know is what we do and how we work our system. Basically, we've got about 700 stocking dealers scattered around the 15 counties here in the Big Bend area of the state. I run a fleet of trucks, vans, and what we call hotshot vehicles to deliver to our dealers quickly so they can help service you as fast and efficiently as they can. Provide timely and efficient service, and we're there to take care of our dealers who in turn can take care of their customers.